Can you believe a person's destiny can be sealed by a cub's roar? There are some stories you hear that you think, that's got to be fiction. But what if I told you the bond between a young woman and a lion, forged in the heat of a fire, would become irrefutable proof that lions have eternal memory and gratitude? Just think for a moment. Have you ever felt that a connection, however unlikely, was written in the stars? The journey of Elina and Riku is exactly like that. It was a meeting that felt like a lifetime in the making, even before it had begun. Young Elina, with her big heart and brave soul, was about to discover that true love doesn't choose its form, size, or species, and that loyalty, well, her loyalty would be tested in a way you could never imagine, because look, their story is living proof that the wild hides secrets about love that we still need to learn. But before this friendship could blossom, she first had to fight for his survival. And it was in the midst of absolute chaos, with the smell of smoke and suffocating heat, that destiny knocked on Elina's door in the form of a small, defenseless cub. It was chaos. The air was thick with the acrid smell of eucalyptus smoke, and the crackling sound of fire consumed everything. Elina, a young volunteer barely out of her teens, felt her heart race with every step, the heat of the ground burning through the soles of her boots. She wasn't a firefighter, but her commitment to animals had led her to that front line. Can you imagine yourself in that situation? With fear at the surface, but duty speaking louder than dread? Then she heard something. A faint, desperate mewling that seemed to come from under a charred log. She knelt down, her hand trembling, and there he was. A lion cub, about a month old, his body covered in soot and his frightened eyes reflecting the dancing flames. She picked him up, and the feeling of his soft fur, even with the smell of burning, was a relief. She knew she had to give him a name, something strong. In that moment, amidst the destruction, she called him Riku. The most fascinating thing here is that for felines, including lions, sound is such a refined sense that they can distinguish human heartbeats. And yes, little Riku could already feel Elina's racing pulse. It's a life lesson for us, you know, that even in the middle of a storm, a small act of compassion can save a life and create a bond that transcends reason. It was as if the universe was whispering in our ear, "It's okay, you're on the right path." If you've ever felt that connection, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe, because we love telling stories like this. But the story doesn't end with the rescue. Far from it. The real challenge was just beginning. Because now, Elina had an orphaned cub, a little furball who was completely dependent on her. How would she teach a wild animal how to live again? And what Riku needed, more than anything, was a home. Elina turned her house into a sanctuary. For Riku, she became his mother, his companion, his teacher. Can you imagine the sound of a lion cub purring? It's not like a house cat. It's a deep, chest-vibrating sound, almost like an electric motor, and Riku loved to nestle in her arms too. Release that symphony of pure contentment. It was a daily ritual where the line between human and animal simply disappeared. And look, taking care of Riku wasn't easy. He had the funniest quirks, like trying to bite her shoes every time she bent down. You know, we learn a lot about patience from animals. They teach us to slow down, to laugh at small misadventures, and to celebrate small victories. And for Elina, every new step Riku took was a win. The first time he ran without falling, the first tiny roar, his clumsy way of trying to catch a leaf the wind carried away. She noticed something surprising. Lions don't actually roar until they are about 2 years old. What they do is meow or purr. So that purr from Riku was his way of saying, "I love you, Mom." The house, which used to be just hers, now had the pulsing life and energy of a wild cub. It seemed the universe somehow had brought these two together in an irrevocable way. The human-animal bond that formed, there was something few are lucky enough to see. We always say that love has a universal language, but have you ever stopped to think that this language can be a look, a caress, a simple purr? But time, that relentless master, doesn't stop. And Riku, who was a tiny cub, was growing. The soft fur of his infancy was giving way to strong muscles and a mane that promised to be majestic. And that's when Elina's heart started to ache, because she knew that at some point she would have to let him go ... Can you believe it? That day arrived. He was no longer a cute, clumsy cub, but a young lion, with his coat shining in the sun and a roar that, though not yet fully formed, was already making the earth tremble. The one she had rescued from the ashes was now ready to return to the wild. Elina's heart felt like a drum beating hard in her chest, and the taste in her mouth was something bitter, an inevitable goodbye. You know, we have this habit of wanting to hold on to what we love, to keep what makes us happy close. But the greatest proof of love is often letting go. And for a lion, reintroduction to the wild isn't just an option, it's a matter of survival. They need to learn to hunt, to interact with the pride, and to recognize dangers, skills that only the ecosystem can teach. And Elina knew that. She cried as she gave him one last caress, feeling the warmth of Riku's fur under her hand. It was the end of a chapter, but the hope of a future for him. But what about you? Would you have the courage to act like that? To say goodbye to someone you love so much, so that they or that animal can have the life they deserve? Riku's last look, a mix of confusion and gratitude, was etched in Elina's memory. She watched him walk away, feeling the smell of freedom mixed with the longing that was already engulfing her. It was as if a part of her soul had been torn away. She knew she would never forget her lion rescue, and deep down, she hoped he wouldn't forget either. She clung to that hope as if it were the last drop of water in the desert, unaware that this goodbye was not the end, but the beginning of a much bigger story. Elina's life went on, but the space Riku left was never filled, and 20 years passed, until one day ... 20 years. 2 decades. Time is a relentless river that carries everything away except the most precious memories. Elina, now an adult woman, returned to that same reserve with the warm savanna sun on her skin and a heart full of nostalgia. The landscape was almost the same, but time had changed her. She was there, reliving a story that felt like it belonged to another life. And who hasn't felt that when returning to a special place? Then she saw him, a majestic lion with an imposing mane, leading a pride of females and cubs. He was the king of that land. His eyes, however, had a familiarity that made her stop, and suddenly the lion stared at her. And he didn't run, didn't show aggression. He walked slowly toward her, letting out a low, guttural sound that sounded like a purr, and Elina's heart stopped. Could it really be him? Here's the most incredible thing. Most lions live about 15 to 20 years in the wild. Riku was already an old lion, but his animal memory surpassed all expectations. He recognized her. That sound, the same purr she knew from his childhood, was his way of saying, "You're back." What happened next was a reunion that seemed to have been orchestrated by the universe itself. The most feared beast of the savannah nestled his head on her shoulder and allowed her to caress him, as if they were the cub and his mother again. Do you believe in miracles? Because this, my friends, this was a miracle. Living proof that love and gratitude don't dissolve with time. This moment was so pure, so powerful, that it couldn't be kept a secret for long. And the news spread like a wildfire, but a wildfire of hope and affection, not destruction. The news of the reunion didn't take long to spread. The image of Elina hugging Riku, the king of the savannah, traveled the world in a matter of hours. The clicking of cameras and the buzzing of phones recording the moment seemed like a modern chorus, celebrating hope. The story went viral, one of those you just can't stop sharing, you know? Because deep down, everyone is looking for a miracle, and the story of Elina and Riku was exactly that. But the repercussions went beyond simple commotion. Suddenly, scientists, biologists, and researchers began to debate. The story of Elina and Riku raised a huge question. How deep are a lion's emotions and memory? We learned that lions are fierce hunters, apex predators, but science is increasingly discovering that their brains, while different from ours, are capable of processing long-term memories and complex emotions, like loyalty. It's fascinating how one story can change the way we see the world. How many times do we underestimate an animal's capacity to feel, just because they don't speak our language? The lesson here is that stories matter. They force us to question what we think we know, to have more empathy, and to see life from a new perspective. This emotional story about the reunion wasn't just about a lion. It was about the very nature of love, and about how true connections can transcend time, logic, and even species. What do we learn from all of this? And so, the chronicle of Elina and Riku comes to an end, but the lesson it leaves us with is eternal. The story of a lion rescue, which seemed to be just a small part of a young woman's life, turned into proof that love can transcend species, time, and distance. Riku's animal memory, his gratitude, and the loyalty he maintained teach us to value the purest connections and to never underestimate the power of a heart that remembers. Thank you for embarking on this emotional story with us. Elina and Riku's journey is a reminder that the wild has so much to teach us about humanity. And what about you? Have you ever had an animal that made a mark on your life or taught you a lesson about love and loyalty? Tell us in the comments. We love reading your stories and learning how nature has touched your hearts. And if this story warmed your heart and made you believe that love truly has no limits, the next video suggested by YouTube will move you even more. Stick around, because the world of animals always has a new lesson to teach us. Until next time.